Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Eddie Jennings from ejsllc.com. This video is going to be another in my practice session series for the Red Hat Exam EX374, Red Hat Certified Specialist in Developing Automation with Ansible Automation Platform. Before I dive in, I want to thank returning subscribers for watching another video, as well as invite anyone who's watching, if you haven't subscribed yet, to click the subscribe button and ring the bell when you do. Also, if you enjoy the content or find it useful, make sure you click like. Another reminder is that these are my practice sessions for the upcoming EX374 exam. It is my opportunity to go through the objectives, talk about them, maybe try to do some examples of them, and throughout the video and at the end do a self-assessment. And either I will feel confident in the objective, as far as if I were to come across tasks on the exam related to it, I should do well, or I'll find that my knowledge is lacking and I have just under 2 weeks to do some final review and shore up a few knowledge gaps prior to the exam. These are not intended to be tutorials, nor are they intended to be training materials. I do try to have the information accurate because I am, preparing for the exam myself. I put these out on the internet not to be training materials, but rather to show anyone who's preparing for this exam some of the things that I'm doing to try to practice, and it might give you some ideas of things that you can try as well. So continuing with the transform data with filters and plugins set of objectives, which are my weakest set for this particular exam. So I can go ahead and say with the assessment, I'm going to have to do some more practice with this. I'm going to look at the inspect, validate, and manipulate variables containing networking information with filters. And from what I have gathered, this is mainly talking about a particular filter called ipaddr, or ansible.utils.ipaddr. And there's a particular Python library that you can install that has the functions and such needed for these filters, and it is baked into the execution images that are provided with Ansible Automation Platform, the actual ones made by RHEL. You can install, I think it's like Python 3-ipaddr package on your RHEL system, and I think it can be installed via pip using ipaddr, but we're just going to be using it from the execution environment. And this actually is kind of a nifty filter that I've learned about in my preparation process. It's not one that I've used in my day-to-day work because I'm not often having to validate IP addresses and such with the things that for which I'm writing Ansible. But I can definitely see some value for your network administrators doing Ansible, and then using it kind of as your own network calculator and such. So we'll do a couple of examples of this. We'll use good old foo.yml. Say testing filter. We'll just run this against one host because we're mainly going to be using debug for this. I'm going to define a variable, and we're going to set an IP address, and then we're going to play with a filter. Just going to do one debug task and do a bunch of messages. So the first message is my IP valid? And we're going to run my IP through a filter called ansible.utils.ipaddr. I think there's one for IPv4 and IPv6 as well. That kind of goes with some of the net filter stuff. All right. So this should, famous last words, right, work. And what will happen is if this is a valid IP address, then it's going to return the value that it was fed. And if it is not, it will return false. So let's see what happens. I have to run this with Ansible Navigator because we need to use our execution environment. And of course, I would have a syntax error. Let's try that again. And turns out it is valid. So let me do something that I know is not going to be valid so we can see the difference. And that's something I recommend you do with any of your preparation stuff, is try to break things so that way if let's say there's something on the exam that you're having to fix something that's broken, well, you might have a chance of having recognized what broken looks like. All right, so I'm going to change this to let's see, what's the one that, 30. 30 is the point to point. And I'm going to make this easy. So this will be, oh, I guess that won't be valid. So let me go back to what it was, and let's give it an invalid subnet. So /35. Let's see what happens with this. Yeah, so false. /35 is not going to be a valid subnet for an IPv4 address. All right, so let's do a couple of other things with this. So let's go back to /24. Some other things you can do, which I find interesting, and I might start incorporating some of this stuff. So it'll be handier than having to go online to find some calculators. Let's say that I wanted to find what the range of this particular network is. So I can do, or the usable range of it. So what is the range? My IP. We're going to bring this into ansible.utils.ipaddr. And I think it's usable. I think it's range usable. That's what it's looking for. Maybe usable range, but I think it's range usable. This is one of the challenges I think I mentioned in a previous video. From what I have seen, there's really no offline documentation for filters. And so that's not quite sure how that's going to be handled on the exam. So I hope whatever filters I have to deal with are things that I may be more familiar with. All right, so let's see what happens. Excellent. So it shows us the usable range for that IP address. You can also, if you needed to figure out the subnet mask for what this is, you're just given the CIDR prefix. You should be able to get that. Feed it net mask. It gives us the net mask of 255.255.255.0. And you can also, you can go the other way. There's, if you feed it an IP address that's like 10.11.12.13/255.255.255.0, you can filter, I think it's prefix/network, and it'll give you the CIDR notation, which is kind of nice. Another thing that it can do is make us another variable. Dead Beef Cafe I'm getting from Fedora, which is kind of, if you were to look up the IPv6 space that a lot of the Fedora project uses, you'll see Dead Beef Cafe in there, which I always thought was funny. All right, so hopefully this will work. Again, this is something that I'm going to need to practice more on between now and the exam. Use var this time. So we're taking my IP list, and let's say that we wanted to, well, first of all, just find only valid IP addresses, which is something I did before. So what should be returned, or what I would expect to be returned, will be basically the three addresses. It should not return localhost. So let's see what happens. Yep, and it did that. It returned everything that wasn't localhost. I know you can have it return like what broadcast address is. So I'm curious to see if it can actually do that, because I haven't given any subnet masks. So I don't think it's actually going to return anything without them having subnet masks defined. Yeah, it didn't return a broadcast. But if I were to add subnet masks, let's see if it'll return that second value now as a broadcast. Oh, I see what it did. All right, so, I was expecting it to find which in that list is a broadcast. What it did, I guess this is the transform part of the, inspect, validate, and manipulate variables. Maybe this is the manipulate part of it. So that's what it did. Interesting. So for the addresses given, it transformed it, or it returned what the broadcast address would be. And so that makes perfect sense as far as what was actually returned. Oh, that's interesting. There's another one now I want to try out, you should be able to get the actual network address. I think if we just do network, it'll do that. Yeah. So /64 IPv6 address basically is whatever's in the first four. They're not called octets. I'm actually not sure what off the top of my head, what the term is for each of that. I mean, they're hex stuff, but anyway, that's showing the valid network address, and likewise for the other two. All right, that's kind of cool. The one other thing I wanted to demonstrate, and this actually is a different filter, but I've seen it be used, and I can see visually how this would be an important thing. It's called IP wrap, and what it will do is encapsulate anything it finds that's IPv6 in brackets. And so maybe that's something that you can use to make that stand out visually. I can't think of off the top of my head the technical usefulness for that other than the visual thing there. And I know there's filters that's like ansible.utils.ipv4 and IPv6. Those I really haven't played with. I've just played with ipaddr. So I think for this is like sort of a pass. I recognize what this filter is and can do some basic things with it, but it's definitely something that I need to review more before the exam and get fresher into my head, because it's not something I touch every day. And that's also true with filters in general. There are some things I use a lot, like the default filter, filtering something, default filter being if there's no value provided, the default will be that value. I use things like int and upper lower to make a string that looks like a number actually be an integer, and then upper and lower case. Little filters like that I use often, but others I don't have the day-to-day need for. So I think for my preparation, I'm going to go through some of the prep materials that I'm using and try to become more familiar with some of those filters. What bothers me is that there's no offline documentation for it that I'm aware of, but I'm not going to try to freak myself out and try to memorize hundreds of filters. I don't think that's well, first of all, I know it's not feasible for me to do, and I think from the exam's perspective, they're probably going to, like this one, I'm fairly certain I'm going to have some type of tasks that wants me to use the ansible.utils.ipaddr, since it's basically called out in the objective. But I think some of the other filters, they're probably not going to pick things that are super obscure, because from my experience, Red Hat exams tend to be functional rather than, here's a bunch of gotchas and we want to see what you memorized. But regardless, this is going to need some more attention from me. So if you've made it this far through these last few objectives, thank you for watching. I do want to thank returning subscribers, obviously, for watching another video, and invite new folks to the channel to subscribe if you find this content useful. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure you click like. As always, thank you for your time, and I'll see you the next time.